Marcus Chen was nobody special on orbital station Kepler 7. He fixed broken pipes. He replaced burned-out lights. He crawled through tight spaces to reach wires that nobody else wanted to touch. He was a maintenance engineer, and in a galaxy full of ancient species with thousands of years of history, that made him almost invisible. The station floated in space around two suns. Thousands of beings lived there. The Velthari were tall and thin with skin like living crystal that caught the light and threw it back in colors. The Gran were huge and strong, built like mountains with gray skin and hands that could crush metal. And then there were the Drakari. They looked like dragons from old Earth stories. They had scales and golden eyes and claws and wings that they kept folded against their backs. The Drakari ruled an empire of 40 star systems. They were the oldest and most powerful species in this part of the galaxy. Humans were new to all of this. They had only been traveling between stars for a few hundred years. Most aliens saw them as children playing in a game meant for adults. They were tolerated. Sometimes they were useful, but they were never respected. Marcus knew all of this. He had learned to keep his head down and do his work and not expect anything more. But there was one thing he refused to give up, no matter how strange the aliens thought it was. Christmas. His grandmother had taught him about Christmas when he was small. She had grown up on Earth in a place called Minnesota, where snow fell every winter and covered everything in white. She told him stories about decorating trees and hanging lights and making ornaments by hand. She showed him how to cut paper into snowflakes. She taught him that the best gifts were not the ones you bought, but the ones you made yourself with love and care. Marcus had never seen snow. He had never been to Earth. He had been born on a colony ship and had lived his whole life in space. But every year, when the calendar turned to December, he transformed his small quarters into something that would have made his grandmother smile. This year, he had worked harder than ever before. His quarters were tiny, just one room with a bed and a small kitchen area and a workbench he had built himself. But now it glowed with color and light. He had made a tree from wire he had saved from old repairs. He had wrapped it in green polymer strips that he had found in the recycling center. It stood in the corner, reaching toward the ceiling, and on its branches hung dozens of ornaments. The ornaments were his pride. He made them from anything he could find. Old heat panels that engineers threw away became shining stars when he cut them right and polished them smooth. Broken sensors gave him fiber optic threads that he wove into patterns that caught and scattered light. Bits of colored glass and metal and wire became angels and animals and snowflakes. Each one took hours to make, sometimes days. His fingers were covered in small burns from the soldering tool. His eyes ached from working in dim light. But when he hung a finished ornament on the tree and watched it sparkle, none of that mattered. The trouble started when his neighbor saw what he had done. Crix was a Velthari trader who lived in the quarters next to his. Their paths crossed often in the hallway. Crix had never been friendly, but had never been cruel either. That changed on the day Crix looked through Marcus's open door and saw the tree. The laugh that came from Crix sounded like glass breaking. It was sharp and high and full of mockery. "What is this?" Crix asked, walking into the room without being invited. The Velthari's crystal skin flashed with colors that Marcus had learned meant amusement. "What have you done to your quarters?" "It's Christmas," Marcus said. He tried to keep his voice calm. "It's a holiday from Earth. We decorate and give gifts and spend time with family. A holiday for hanging garbage on wire?" Crix laughed again. "Look at this. You have taken trash and put it on display. How very human. How very sad." Marcus felt his face grow hot. "They're not trash. They're ornaments. I made them. You made them from garbage. That makes them garbage with extra steps." Crix took a picture with a small device. "The others need to see this." The human who decorates his home with refuse. They will find it very funny. Marcus wanted to say something. He wanted to defend himself. But Crix was already gone, and he knew that nothing he said would matter anyway. By the next day, everyone on the station seemed to know. The pictures spread across the station's social network. Someone had added comments in 12 different languages. Most of them said the same thing in different ways. Stupid human. Primitive human. Look at the child playing with garbage. The maintenance crews laughed when Marcus walked past. Not openly, not loud enough for him to respond to, but loud enough for him to hear. Even the Gran, who usually seemed to care about nothing except their work, looked at him with what might have been pity or might have been amusement. A group of Veltari traders saw him in a corridor, and one of them called out, "Hey, garbage man, make anything new today?" They laughed together, their crystal bodies chiming like broken bells. Marcus said nothing. He kept walking. He did his job. He fixed the broken things that needed fixing, and he tried not to think about the looks and the whispers and the laughter at night. He went back to his quarters and sat alone with his tree and his ornaments. He thought about taking it all down. He thought about throwing everything away and pretending that he had never cared about any of it. But then he looked at the ornaments. He looked at the star he had made from an old heat panel, the way it caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the wall. He looked at the angel with wings of copper wire. He looked at the snowflakes cut from paper, the same way his grandmother had taught him. No, he would not let them take this from him. He picked up his tools and started working on something new. A dragon, he decided, made from copper and salvaged hull plating that had an iridescent shine to it. It would have wings and scales, and it would be beautiful. He worked late into the night, alone in his small room, surrounded by decorations that aliens called garbage and he called art. He did not know that someone was watching him. High above, on an observation deck that only important visitors could use. Golden eyes looked down through a floor that was transparent from above, but solid from below. The Dracari princess watched the human work. She watched his careful hands and his focused face. She watched him hold up the unfinished dragon to check his progress. And she saw something she had not seen in a very long time. She saw someone creating something beautiful. Not for money or status or power, but simply because he wanted to. Simply because it made him happy. Princess Sirith had been sent to this station as punishment. She was supposed to be learning humility. Instead, she had found something far more interesting. She had found a human who made art from nothing, and she could not look away. Princess Sirith Vrokan was not supposed to be on Kepler 7. She was the third daughter of the Dragon Throne, heir to the greatest merchant fleet in the Dracari Empire. She was supposed to be on the homeworld, attending balls and diplomatic functions and being presented to suitable noble families. Instead, she was here, exiled, punished, all because she had told the truth. A noble from a powerful family had asked for her hand in marriage. He was old and cruel, and everyone knew that he had treated his previous 3 wives badly. But he was rich, and his family controlled important trade routes, and her father had wanted her to at least consider the offer. Sirith had not just refused. She had refused publicly, at a gathering attended by hundreds of nobles from across the empire. She had listed every terrible thing the suitor had ever done. She had called him names that made the older nobles gasp and the younger ones hide their smiles. She had ended by saying that she would rather clean waste systems on a backwater station than spend one day as his wife. Her father had been furious. And so here she was, on a backwater station, learning what he called humility and what she called exile. She was supposed to stay in the diplomatic quarters on the upper levels. She was supposed to meet with traders and learn about commerce. She was supposed to stay out of trouble and be quiet and think about what she had done. She did none of these things. Instead, she paced. She wandered. She found ways to explore the station without being seen. And one night, while walking on the observation deck that hung above Section D, she looked down through the transparent floor and saw something strange. A human was building something. She stopped and watched. The human was small compared to her kind, with dark hair and brown skin and hands that moved with surprising care. He sat at a workbench covered with tools and scraps of material. He was bending wire into shapes. He was cutting metal into pieces. He was making something, though she could not tell what. She watched for an hour that first night. Then she came back the next night and the next. She watched the human work late into the dark hours. Watched him fail and try again. Watched him burn his fingers and keep going. She watched him finish things and hold them up to the light with an expression of pure joy on his face. The things he made were decorations, ornaments. She learned this by watching and listening through the floor. The human talked to himself sometimes while he worked. He called his creations Christmas ornaments. He hummed songs she did not know. He hung each finished piece on a strange wire tree in the corner of his room. Sirith had grown up surrounded by beautiful things. The Drakari had been collecting treasures for 10,000 years. Her family palace held sculptures made from the frozen hearts of dying stars. They owned tapestries woven from captured light. They had gems that sang when you touched them and paintings that moved and changed when you looked at them. But all of these things had been made by others. They had been bought or traded or taken in conquest. They had been collected and displayed and admired, but never created. Not by the Drakari themselves. Her people did not make things. That was what servants and lesser species were for. A noble Drakari would never lower themselves to work with their hands. That was simply not done. And yet this human, this nobody from a young and unimportant species, was doing exactly that. He was making beautiful things with his own hands. Not for money, not for status, not because anyone told him to. He was doing it because he wanted to, because it made him happy. Sirith found herself thinking about him during the day. She found herself looking forward to the nights when she could watch him work. She did not understand why. She only knew that seeing him create filled her with a strange feeling, a kind of hunger, a kind of loneliness she had never felt before. Then the mockery began. She heard about it from her guardian, an ancient warrior named Vorath, who had served her family for 300 years. He thought it was funny. He told her about the human who decorated his home with garbage, about the jokes spreading across the station, about how everyone was laughing at the silly primitive creature who did not know his place. Sirith did not laugh. She felt something else, something hot and sharp and unfamiliar. Anger. She was angry. Angry at the aliens who were mocking him. Angry at a galaxy that could not see what she saw. These station dwellers are fools, she said to Vorath. Her claws extended without her meaning them to, scraping against the floor. Vorath's golden eyes showed surprise. They are simply acting as expected, Your Highness. Humans are a young species. They have not earned respect. Mocking them is normal. Normal is not the same as right. Perhaps not. But it is how things are. Sirith turned away from him. She looked down through the floor at the human's quarters. He was still there, still working, even though his face showed tiredness and sadness now. He was finishing the dragon she had watched him start. It was beautiful. Its wings were thin as paper, but strong. Its scales caught the light and threw it back in 100 colors. He did not stop working, even though the whole station was laughing at him. He did not throw his creations away. He kept making beauty, even when no one else could see it. In that moment, Sirith made a decision. I am going down there, she said. Vorath's scales actually changed color with shock. Your Highness, that is Section D, the workers' quarters. No Drakari of noble blood has ever gone there. It would be beneath you. Your father be furious. My father sent me here to learn humility." Sirith smiled, showing teeth that were sharp as knives. "Perhaps this is what humility looks like." She did not give Varth time to argue. She walked to the lift and stepped inside. She pressed the button for Section D. Her hearts were beating fast. She did not know what she was going to say to the human. She only knew that she had to say something. The lift descended. The doors opened. She stepped out into a corridor that was plain and gray and nothing like the decorated halls she had known her whole life. She walked until she found the door she was looking for. She could hear sounds from inside. The soft clink of tools. The human was working. She knocked. The sound stopped. There was a long pause. Then the door opened, and for the first time, Sirith stood face to face with Marcus Chun. He looked at her with wide eyes. She could see that he was afraid. Humans were often afraid of Dracari. They were right to be. Her people had conquered worlds. Her people had armies and fleets and power beyond imagining. But she had not come here to frighten him. "You are the one who makes the decorations," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. Yes, his voice was small. "Can I help you?" "I wish to see them." He stepped aside. She walked into his quarters and looked around at what he had created. The tree with its glowing lights. The ornaments hanging from every branch. The workbench covered with half-finished projects. The dragon, complete now, resting on a cloth beside his tools. She picked up the dragon. It was warm from the light, and its scale shimmered like something alive. "You made this," she said, "with your own hands, from things that others threw away." "Yes." He sounded confused. Maybe a little scared still. "Is that wrong?" Sirith looked at him. She looked at the dragon in her hands. She thought about all the treasures in her family's palace, all the beautiful things that her ancestors had collected but never created. "No," she said. "It is wonderful. It is the most wonderful thing I have seen in a very long time." And for the first time since she had arrived on this station, Sirith felt something other than boredom and anger. She felt hope. Marcus could not believe what was happening. A Dracari was standing in his quarters. Not just any Dracari, but one who wore clothes that probably cost more than everything he had ever owned. One who carried herself like she expected the universe to move out of her way. One whose golden eyes looked at his ornaments like they were treasures instead of trash. "You have been watching me," he said. It was not a question. He had felt something these past weeks. A strange prickle on the back of his neck when he worked late at night. He had told himself it was nothing. Now he understood. Yes. She did not seem ashamed. "The observation deck above your quarters has a transparent floor. I have watched you work many times." "Why?" She set the dragon down gently on his workbench. Her claws, which looked like they could tear through metal, touched the ornament as softly as a mother touching a child. "Because I have never seen anyone do what you do." She turned to look at him. "My people collect beautiful things. We buy them. We take them. We display them and admire them. But we do not make them. We have forgotten how. We have forgotten why." Marcus did not know what to say. He had spent his whole life being ignored by species like hers. He had learned to expect nothing from them except orders and occasional insults. This was different. This was strange. He did not know the rules for this. "I am Princess Sirith Vakan," she said, "third daughter of the Dragon Throne." Marcus felt his knees go weak. A princess. An actual Dracari princess was standing in his tiny maintenance worker quarters, looking at his homemade Christmas ornaments. He should bow. He should kneel. He should do something. "I want you to make me something," she said before he could move. "What?" "An ornament," Whatever you wish to make, whatever inspires you, I will pay you for your work. Your Highness, I am just a maintenance engineer. I make these things for myself. I have never sold anything. I would not know what to charge." She named a number. Marcus heard it but could not process it. That amount of money would pay his rent for 10 years. For 15, he could buy better tools, better materials. He could stop crawling through pipes and live off his art alone. "That is too much," he said. "I cannot accept that. You can and you will." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "I have watched you work, Marcus Chun. I have seen the hours you put into each piece. I have seen the care and the love and the skill. That is worth more than any number I could name." She moved closer to him. She was tall, much taller than him, and her presence seemed to fill his small room like heat from a fire. "My people have forgotten something important," she said. "We have become collectors instead of creators. We have spent so long gathering the treasures of others that we have lost the ability to make our own. You have reminded me of something I did not know I had lost." "What is that?" "The joy of making something with your own hands. The pride of creating beauty from nothing." She smiled, and it transformed her face from frightening to almost warm. "You have 1 week. Make me something. Anything. Surprise me." Then she was gone, walking out of his quarters and down the corridor as if she owned the whole station. Which, Marcus realized, she probably could buy if she wanted to. He stood alone in his room for a long time after she left. His mind was spinning. A princess had visited him. A Drakari princess had looked at his ornaments and called them wonderful. She had commissioned him to make her something. She believed his work was worth more than he had ever imagined. The news spread quickly. By the next morning, everyone on the station knew that Princess Sirith had visited the human maintenance worker. They knew she had spent time in his quarters. They knew she had admired his decorations. The mockery stopped immediately. Crix, the Velthury neighbor who had started all of this, appeared at his door with an expression that might have been embarrassment. "Perhaps I spoke too quickly before," Crix said. "Your decorations are clearly more impressive than I understood." Marcus wanted to laugh. He wanted to point out that the ornaments had not changed. They were exactly the same as they had been when Crix called them garbage. The only thing different was that someone powerful had shown them respect, but he said nothing. He simply nodded and closed the door and went back to his workbench. He had 1 week to make something for a princess. For 3 days, he did not work. He sat and thought. He walked around the station. He looked at the stars through the observation windows. He asked himself the same question over and over. What could he make for someone who already had everything? The Drakari were ancient and wealthy beyond imagining. They owned treasures from 1,000 worlds. They had art created by species that had been dead for millennia. What could a human maintenance engineer offer that would mean anything? The answer came to him on the 3rd night. He was sitting in the observation lounge, watching ships move past the station, when he remembered something his grandmother had told him. The best gift, she had said, is not the most expensive. It is the one that carries meaning. It is the one that tells a story. He knew what he had to make. He went to work that same night. He requested materials through official channels, using the princess's commission as proof that he was working on something important. For the first time in his life, he did not have to scavenge and save. He could ask for what he needed and receive it. But the most important piece was something he already had. He had been saving it for years, keeping it wrapped in cloth in a box under his bed. A small fragment of meteor iron that a trader had brought from Earth's solar system. A piece of home. A piece of the world his grandmother had come from. He worked day and night. He barely slept. He ate when he remembered to, and forgot when he did not. His fingers bled and his eyes burned, and he did not stop. On the 6th day, he finished. He called it First Light. It was a snowflake made of titanium and crystal and fiber optic threads. But it was not like any snowflake he had made before. Each arm told a story. One showed tiny figures gathered around a fire, the first fire that humans had ever made. Another showed a boat with a sail, the first time humans had crossed an ocean. Another showed a footprint on a gray surface, the first step on Luna. Another showed a ship leaving a yellow sun behind, the first journey to another star. And at the center, where all the arms met, sat the fragment of meteor iron. He had set it in crystal and surrounded it with fiber optics that made it glow with soft golden light. A piece of earth shining at the heart of a snowflake that told the story of humanity. Around the edge, in letters so small they could barely be read, he had written words in both English and Drakari. We came from nothing. We reached for everything. We never stopped making beauty. When the princess came to collect her commission, he handed it to her with shaking hands. She held it up to the light. She read the tiny words. She studied each arm, each scene, each detail. She touched the meteor fragment at the center and her golden eyes went wide. "This is from Earth," she whispered. "Yes, my grandmother gave it to me before she died. It is the only piece of my homeworld I have ever owned." "And you put it in something you made for me? You asked me to surprise you. I thought—" He stopped. He did not know how to explain. He did not know if she would understand, but she understood. He could see it in her face. He could see it in the way her hands trembled as she held the ornament. "You gave me a piece of your home," she said. "You gave me the story of your people. You gave me everything." And then something happened that Marcus had never seen before. Something that the Drakari record keepers would later say had not happened in centuries. A Karat, and as the Drakari record keepers would later say had not happened in centuries. Akode, princess of the dragon throne, began to cry. Her tears were golden, like drops of molten metal, and they fell onto the ornament and made it shine even brighter. She did not try to hide them. She did not seem ashamed. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you, Marcus-chan. You do not know what you have done, but you will." She left with the ornament held carefully in both hands, like it was the most precious thing she had ever owned. Marcus watched her go and wondered what she meant. He would not have to wonder for long. The days after the princess took the ornament were strange for Marcus. He went back to his normal work, fixing pipes and replacing lights and doing all the small jobs that kept the station running. But nothing felt normal anymore. People treated him differently now. The mockery had stopped completely. Instead, aliens who had never spoken to him before would nod when he passed. Some even said hello. A ground worker who had laughed at him just weeks ago now looked at him with something like respect. It was uncomfortable. Marcus had spent years being invisible, and now suddenly everyone could see him. He did not know what to do with the attention. He threw himself into his work, his regular work during the day and his real work at night. He made more ornaments. He made them better than before, pushing himself to try new things. He had money now from the princess's payment, and he used it to buy better tools and better materials. His creations grew more beautiful with each passing day. He did not hear from the princess. He wondered sometimes if he had imagined the whole thing. Had she really cried? Had she really called his work wonderful? Or had it been some strange dream? Then, 1 week after she had taken the ornament, he received a message that it came on official paper, with a seal he did not recognize pressed into red wax. He opened it with trembling hands. "Marcus-chan," the message read. "You are invited to attend a formal gathering in the grand atrium of Kepler-7 station. Your presence is requested by Her Imperial Highness, Princess Sereth Verkan, third daughter of the Dragon Throne. Attendance is mandatory." That last line made him laugh. Then it made him nervous. Then it made him confused. What kind of invitation says attendance is mandatory? He showed the message to some of his fellow workers. They had never seen anything like it either. But they all agreed on one thing. When a Drakari princess tells you to be somewhere, you go. The Grand Atrium was a place Marcus had never been before. It was in the upper levels of the station, far from the maintenance corridors and worker quarters where he spent his days. It was reserved for important events, trade negotiations, diplomatic meetings, the kind of things that shaped the future of entire star systems. On the day of the gathering, Marcus put on his cleanest uniform. It was still a maintenance worker's uniform, plain and simple, but it was the best he had. He walked to the lift and rode it up to levels he had never visited. He stepped down into corridors that were clean and bright and decorated with art from a dozen different worlds. The Grand Atrium was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The ceiling was so high it seemed to disappear into darkness. The floor was polished stone that reflected the lights like water. And it was full of people. Hundreds of them. Thousands maybe. Velthari and Gron and Drakari and humans and species Marcus did not even recognize. He found a spot near the back, trying to make himself small. He did not belong here among all these important people. He did not know why he had been invited. He thought about leaving, about slipping away before anyone noticed him. Then the lights dimmed and he could not move anymore. A hollow projection appeared in the air above the crowd. Images began to play. Images of a small room in Section D. Images of a workbench covered with tools. Images of hands working, shaping, creating, his hands. His room. His ornaments. The crowd murmured with surprise and confusion. Marcus felt his face grow hot. What was happening? Why was the princess showing everyone his life? Then her voice filled the atrium, strong and clear and impossible to ignore. My people have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. Princess Sereth walked onto a raised platform at the center of the room. She was wearing formal clothes now, robes of deep purple and black that made her scales shine like jewels. In her hand she held something small and glowing. First light, his ornament. We have built an empire that spans 40 star systems, she continued. We have gathered treasures beyond counting. We have conquered worlds and collected their wonders. We have filled our palaces with beauty from every corner of the galaxy. She paused. The crowd was silent, waiting. But somewhere along the way, we forgot something. We forgot that there is a difference between owning beauty and creating it. We became collectors. We became gatherers. We became thieves, in a way, because we took the art of others without ever learning to make our own. She held up the ornament. The lights in the atrium caught it, and suddenly the whole room was filled with scattered light, tiny rainbows dancing on every surface. This was made by a human, Sereth said. A maintenance engineer who lives in Section D. He works with his hands. He fixes things that are broken. And in his spare time, he creates beauty. The images above changed. Now they showed close-ups of his ornaments. The stars made from old heat panels. The angels with wings of copper wire. The snowflakes cut from paper. The dragons with iridescent scales. He made these from things that others threw away. From garbage, some would say. From trash and scraps and refuse. But look at them. Look at what he created from nothing. The crowd was completely silent. Marcus could feel eyes searching for him, but he stayed still, hidden in the shadows at the back of the room. The humans have a holiday called Christmas, Sereth said. It is a time when they gather with family and give gifts to each other. But the gifts they value most are not the expensive ones. They are the ones made by hand. The ones that carry love and effort and meaning. She looked down at first light in her hands. This ornament contains a piece of earth, a fragment of meteor iron from the human homeworld. The artist gave me a piece of his history, his culture, his heart. He gave me everything. Her golden eyes swept across the crowd. We mocked him for this. The people of this station saw a human making things with his hands, and they laughed. They called his work garbage. They shared images of his quarters and made jokes in 12 languages. Some of the aliens in the crowd looked down. Marcus saw Crix near the front, looking uncomfortable. We were wrong. All of us. We looked at a creator and saw a fool. We looked at an artist and saw a primitive. We looked at something beautiful and called it trash because we had forgotten what creation looks like. She held the ornament high. I am not going to make that mistake again. This piece will hang in the gallery of House Vulcan, beside treasures that predate human existence. And I am going to tell everyone who sees it the same thing. This was made by human hands, from human heart, and it is worth more than all the gold in the empire. The crowd did not know how to react. This was not how things were done. This was not how the galaxy worked. Humans were young and unimportant. Their work was not supposed to hang in the palaces of the Dragon Throne, but nobody argued. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke at all. They just looked at the ornament. Glowing with the light of a distant Earth, and for the first time in their lives, they wondered if maybe they had been wrong about humans all along. Marcus stood in the shadows, tears running down his face, and thought about his grandmother. He thought about paper snowflakes and stories of Minnesota winters. He thought about a small boy learning that the best gifts are the ones you make yourself. She would have been proud. She would have been so proud, Dot, and the night was not over yet. The princess had more to say. She was looking out at the crowd with fire in her golden eyes, and Marcus could tell that everything was about to change. Princess Sirith stood on the platform with the ornament held high, and she was not finished speaking. I have a request to make, she said. Not as a princess, not as a member of the Dragon Throne, but as someone who has learned something important in my time on this station. She lowered the ornament and held it against her chest, protecting it like something precious. The humans have something we do not. They have the joy of creation. They make things with their own hands, not because they have to, but because they want to. They find happiness in the act of building, of shaping, of bringing something new into the universe. Her golden eyes found the back of the atrium, found Marcus. He felt her gaze like a weight on his shoulders. I would like to learn. I would like all of us to learn. She stepped down from the platform and began walking through the crowd. Aliens moved aside for her, creating a path. She walked straight and steady, never looking away from Marcus. Marcus Chun, she said, her voice still carrying through the atrium. Would you be willing to teach us? Every eye in the room turned to the back. To him, to a maintenance worker in a plain uniform, who had never expected anyone to notice him at all, Marcus felt like he could not breathe. He felt like the whole universe had suddenly gotten smaller, closing in around him until there was nothing left except this moment and this question. He thought about running. He thought about saying no. He thought about all the times he had been laughed at, all the times he had been ignored, all the times he had been made to feel like nothing. But then he thought about his grandmother. He thought about her hands showing him how to cut paper into snowflakes. He thought about her voice telling him stories of Earth. He thought about the look on her face when he made something and showed it to her. That look of pride and love that he would never see again. She had wanted him to share this. She had taught him because she wanted him to teach others someday. That was how traditions survived. That was how beauty spread across the universe. Yes, he said. His voice was quiet at first, lost in the huge space. He cleared his throat and said it again, louder. Yes, I will teach anyone who wants to learn. The princess smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. Nothing like the cold expressions Marcus had seen on other Drakari faces. "Then let us begin," she said. She waved her hand and the lights came up. Tables appeared at the edges of the atrium, carried in by station workers. On the tables were materials, paper and wire and scraps of metal and tools of all kinds. Exactly the kind of things Marcus used in his own quarters. "Tonight," Sirith announced, "we celebrate a human holiday called Christmas. And we celebrate it in the human way, by making things with our own hands." There was a long moment of silence. Then someone moved. A young Drakari, not much older than a child by their kind standards, walked to one of the tables and picked up a piece of paper. "How do I start?" the young Drakari asked. Marcus found himself walking forward, moving through the crowd toward the table. His legs were shaking, but his hands were steady. His hands always knew what to do. "I can show you," he said. "It is not hard. Here, let me teach you how to make a snowflake." He took the paper and began to fold. The young Drakari watched with wide golden eyes and then tried to copy him. The folds were clumsy at first, the cuts uneven, but it was a start. More people came to the tables. Valkyrie with their crystal fingers that caught the light. Gron with their huge hands that seemed too big for delicate work, but tried anyway. Humans who already knew some techniques and helped teach others. And Drakari, proud ancient Drakari, who set aside thousands of years of tradition and picked up scissors and wire and began to create. The atrium filled with the sounds of work, cutting and folding and shaping. Laughter when something went wrong. Cheers when something went right. Questions and answers and conversations between species who had never talked to each other before. Marcus moved from table to table, helping where he could, encouraging where he could not. He showed a Gron how to bend wire without breaking it. He taught a Valkyrie how to cut paper so the snowflake would be symmetrical. He helped a Drakari noble understand that mistakes were not failures. They were just steps on the way to something beautiful. Princess Sirith worked beside him. She was clumsy with her claws, not used to such delicate work, but she did not give up. She ruined 3 attempts at a paper snowflake before she made one that held together. When she did, she held it up with an expression of such pure joy that Marcus had to look away to hide his own tears. "This is what it feels like," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "This is what I saw on your face all those nights when you worked. This feeling. This pride." "Yes," he said. "This is what it feels like to make something." The celebration went on for hours. As the night grew late, the atrium began to transform. Paper snowflakes hung from strings attached to the high ceiling. Wire stars dangled from every surface. Ornaments of all kinds, rough and imperfect and beautiful in their imperfection. Decorated tables and walls and the clothes of the people who had made them. It did not look like the Drakari galleries with their perfect ancient treasures. It looked like a child's classroom, messy and colorful and alive. It was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. Near the end of the night, the princess called for silence one more time. She stood at the center of the atrium, surrounded by the decorations that hundreds of hands had made. "Tonight we did something new," she said. "Tonight we created instead of collected. Tonight we learned that beauty does not have to be old or expensive or perfect. Beauty can be made by anyone, from anything, if they have the will and the love to try." She looked at Marcus. "I am formally requesting, on behalf of the Dragon Throne and the Drakari Empire, that humanity share their traditions with the Galactic Compact. I am asking that you teach us not just how to make ornaments, but how to celebrate, how to give, how to find joy in creation." She paused. "Will you teach us how to make Christmas?" The atrium was quiet. Everyone was looking at Marcus again. The human maintenance worker who had started all of this just by doing what he loved. He thought about the future. He thought about Drakari children learning to cut paper snowflakes. He thought about wealthy traders making gifts for each other instead of buying them. He thought about Christmas spreading across the stars, touching species who had never known the holiday, bringing them the same warmth it had brought him. His grandmother had taught him. He had taught the princess. The princess would help him teach the galaxy. This was how tradition survived. This was how love spread across the universe. "Yes," he said, and his voice did not shake at all. "Yes, I will teach you. I will teach anyone who wants to learn." That is what Christmas is about. Sharing what you have, giving what you can, making beauty from nothing and passing it on. The crowd erupted, not in mockery this time, but in celebration. Aliens cheered and clapped and made sounds that Marcus did not even recognize, but he understood their meaning: joy, gratitude, hope. Later, historians would call this moment the beginning of a new era. They would write about the night that humanity stopped being the galaxy's youngest, weakest species and became something else. They would call it the night of first light, named after an ornament made by a maintenance worker from scraps of garbage and a piece of home. They would say that this was when humanity taught the galaxy how to create, how to celebrate, how to love. But Marcus did not think about history. He did not think about the future of species relations or the diplomatic implications of what he had done. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about her hands and her voice and her smile. He thought about a small apartment on a colony ship where she had taught him to cut paper into snowflakes. "I did it, Grandma," he whispered. "I passed it on." Above him, hanging from the ceiling of the grand atrium, 100 paper snowflakes caught the light and scattered it across the faces of 100 different species. And at the center of the room, held carefully in the claws of a dragon princess, an ornament called First Light glowed with the heart of a distant Earth. The light spread out across the atrium. It touched the decorations on the walls. It touched the faces of the aliens who had made them. It touched Marcus, warming his skin like sunshine he had never felt. And far away, across the vast emptiness of space, in a solar system that Marcus had never visited, but had always called home, a planet called Earth turned slowly in the light of its yellow sun. Its children had gone to the stars. They had taken their traditions with them. They had taught the universe how to make beauty from nothing. And that was the greatest gift of all. The celebration continued until the station's lights began to brighten, marking the beginning of a new cycle. Aliens drifted away with their handmade ornaments, carrying pieces of Christmas back to their quarters, their ships, their homeworlds. But the tradition they carried would never fade. It would spread across the galaxy like light from a new star, touching every world it reached. Humanity had come from nothing. They had reached for everything. They had never stopped making beauty. And now, at last, the universe understood why.